When I first moved into that tiny studio apartment in Chicago, it felt like a fresh start. I had just finished college, didn't have much to my name except a backpack full of clothes, some secondhand furniture, and a mountain of student debt. The apartment wasn't anything fancy, a cramped single-room unit on the top floor of a 3-story brick building. But the rent was cheap, it was close to work, and most importantly, it was mine. The only window in the apartment faced a narrow, dark alley that separated my building from another apartment complex just like it. The alley was barely wide enough to fit a single car and felt like a cave. Sunlight never reached it during the day, and at night it was pitch black. But I didn't mind. I wasn't home much during the day anyway. I worked nights bartending at a jazz lounge up north and usually got home around 2:30 or 3 a.m., dead tired and half zoned out. Most nights I'd cook something quick, scroll through my phone and crash on the futon. About a month in, I noticed something strange. I had just walked in, kicked off my shoes, and flicked on the overhead light when I thought I saw something shift in the window directly across the alley. Just a flicker, maybe a curtain moving. I paused, squinting at the darkened window, but it looked still. Maybe it was just the light catching something weird. I brushed it off, but the next night it happened again. This time I was sure. As soon as I turned on my light, the curtain across the alley twitched, just slightly. A hand, I think, pulled it back for half a second before letting it fall shut. I couldn't see the person. The window on their side was completely dark. No lights on, no movement, just the briefest sliver of space between the curtains. What really bothered me was that I'd never seen the lights on in that apartment. Not once. I had always assumed it was vacant. After that second night, the pit in my stomach didn't go away. I started watching more carefully. And sure enough, every single night, within seconds of me walking in and turning on my lights, the curtain would shift. Always the same motion. A slow, silent parting just enough for someone to see through. And then it would close. I tested it. I'd leave my lights off, stay low near the couch and peek out. Nothing. The window stayed still. But the moment I flipped on a light, even the little lamp by my bed, the curtain would move. Someone was watching me. Every night. And they only reacted when I came home. I tried to stay logical. Told myself maybe it was just a neighbor with weird timing or a habit of looking out their window. But the consistency was impossible to ignore. The timing was too precise. They responded to me. Eventually, I asked my landlord about the apartment across the alley. He looked surprised and told me it had been vacant for months. Said no one had even inquired about it since the last tenant moved out. I pressed him again. Maybe someone moved in and he forgot? Maybe a sublet? But he shook his head and even chuckled a bit, saying I sounded paranoid. I didn't call the cops. What would I even say? Someone might be looking at me from a dark window in a building that's supposedly empty? There was no crime, no proof. Just a deeply unsettling feeling that grew stronger every night. Then one night it changed. I got home around 4 a.m., later than usual. The bar had hosted a private event and cleanup ran long. I was half asleep, dragging myself up the stairs when I noticed something wedged in my doorframe. My first thought was a flyer or some pizza coupon. But when I pulled it free, my blood ran cold. It was a crumpled piece of notebook paper. No envelope, no explanation, just the word, "Hey," scrawled in shaky handwriting. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. That window. I turned and ran to it, yanked the blinds open. The curtain across the alley was drawn shut. No movement, no light, just the same dead black window staring back at me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I called my friend Jamie, who lived across town. She told me to come over immediately. I threw essentials into a backpack, grabbed my wallet, and got the hell out. The next morning, I marched into the landlord's office and demanded to see the apartment across the alley. I wasn't polite about it. Something was seriously wrong. He hesitated, but finally agreed. We walked over together. He unlocked the door and stepped inside first. The air was stale, thick with dust. The floors creaked under our weight, and every surface was covered in grime. It was exactly what a long-abandoned apartment should look like. Empty, cold, untouched. Except for one thing. In the back room, the one directly across from my window, sat a single metal folding chair. Just one. Positioned dead center facing the window. Nothing else in the room. No other furniture, no signs of squatters. Just that chair and the silent understanding that someone had been sitting there, night after night, watching me. I felt sick. I wanted to scream. The landlord looked stunned, muttered something about how that hadn't been there before. I didn't care, I was done. The police were called, they dusted for prints, took statements, but nothing ever came of it. No arrests, no explanation. The building was locked down tighter after that, but it didn't matter. I moved out by the end of the week. Sometimes I wonder if it was the landlord himself. But if he had planted that chair, wouldn't he have removed it before showing me? That uncertainty haunts me more than any answer could. I still dream about that window, about that sliver of space between the curtains. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can still feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from the dark. Like someone's still sitting in a chair, watching. When I was 12, my family moved to a remote part of Oregon, miles away from the nearest neighbor, let alone a town. We'd left the city behind for a stretch of land surrounded by endless pine forest. It was peaceful, sure, but also isolating in the kind of way that makes the silence almost too loud. The house itself was old, built in the 1940s, with all the classic creepy features, floors that creaked like whispers, a narrow attic no one wanted to explore, and a rundown shed that sat about 30 feet behind the house. That shed had a vibe. You could feel it. The outside was warped from decades of rain and snow, its rusted hinges groaned even in the wind. Inside was worse, stacked with rotting tools, broken furniture, and junk from the previous owners. My dad always said he'd clean it out, but he never did. We all kept our distance. It felt wrong, even in broad daylight. The first time I noticed something was off. It was close to midnight on a weeknight. I was hiding under the covers reading by flashlight when I heard Max, our golden retriever, barking like mad. He was friendly, a total goof. But when he barked like that, it meant something was wrong. I got up, crept to the window, and peeked out. Max was in the yard, facing the shed, barking furiously into the darkness. The motion sensor light near the back door had clicked on, throwing long shadows across the lawn. I couldn't see anyone. Just Max barking like his life depended on it. I watched until he finally settled, then went back to bed with a pit in my stomach. The next morning, my dad found deep boot prints in the dirt, fresh, clear ones, leading from the woods toward the shed. No prints away from it. He brushed it off, said it was probably a hunter or drifter passing through. That didn't explain why Max was losing his mind, or why the footprints kept returning. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated. Max would bark at random hours, usually after midnight. Every time we checked, no one was there. But each morning, more boot prints, always leading to the shed, never away. Then, one night around 2 a.m., I heard the unmistakable crunch of gravel outside my window. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I froze, my heart thudding in my ears. The steps paused, then resumed, moving toward the shed. I inched toward the blinds, careful not to make a sound. Just as I peeked out, the motion light turned on. And there he was. A tall man stood next to the shed door, motionless. He wore a filthy gray coat, his face hidden in shadows, just standing there like he belonged to the night. Then the light flickered off and he was swallowed by the dark. I scrambled away from the window and woke my parents. My dad grabbed his rifle and bolted outside, but the man was already gone. What he did find were more fresh footprints. This time, my dad finally opened the shed. He unlocked the padlock and swung the doors open. The place still looked untouched, dusty, cluttered, reeking of mildew. But that didn't mean it was safe. He added a second lock and braced the doors with a board across the handles. Things calmed down for a while. No barking, no footsteps. We thought maybe whoever it was had moved on. Then Max disappeared. One day, he just didn't come back from his usual run around the property. We searched for hours, called out his name until our voices were hoarse. We combed through the woods, drove up and down the road, even checked with distant neighbors. Nothing. He was just gone. My heart broke in a way I still can't explain. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the man, about Max, about the shed. Around 3:00 a.m., I heard the faint groan of the back door. My heart dropped. I climbed out of bed and crept to the hallway where I found my dad already awake, gripping his rifle like he had been waiting for this moment. Together, we stepped quietly toward the back of the house. The motion sensor light blinked on, and there he was again, standing beside the shed. Only this time he was holding something. In one hand, a large knife. In the other, Max's collar. My breath caught. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I just stood there feeling the world tilt. My dad burst out the door shouting, rifle raised. The man didn't even flinch. He turned slowly and slipped into the woods like smoke. My dad fired a few shots into the trees, but there was no scream, no sound of running. He was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the area, combed the woods, but found no trace of the man. What they did find in the shed, though, would haunt us forever. The floor had been disturbed, cleared of junk and swept smooth. In the dirt, someone had carved twisted symbols, disturbing shapes. In one corner was a pile of small bones. Animal, we hoped. Behind a false panel in the wall, they discovered a backpack filled with random items, wallets, watches, bits of clothing, items that clearly didn't belong to us. The worst part was a notebook. Its pages were covered in jagged handwriting, strange drawings of families, homes, and unblinking eyes. It was like a message, a warning, a record of those he had watched before. We didn't wait around. As we packed to leave, I took one last glance out my bedroom window. The police tape fluttered in the wind, the shed still and empty. But just beyond it, 10 feet into the trees, I saw him. His face, pale, expressionless, watching. Then he vanished. I screamed for my dad. He came running, rifle ready. I pointed toward the trees and he stormed outside, yelling like a man possessed, firing warning shots into the woods. His rage was pure, unfiltered. We were being forced out of our home by something evil, something dangerous. We left 2 days later. We never went back. It was the summer of 2018 when 5 of us, Abby, Marcus, his younger brother Tim, Tim's girlfriend Hannah, and me, planned a weekend camping trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We were all in our early 20s, fresh out of college, craving a break from buzzing phones, deadlines, and city noise. We chose a remote spot buried deep in the national park, well off any beaten path. No signal, no nearby towns, just thick forest, winding trails, and silence. It felt perfect. On the first day, we hiked in with our gear and set up near a lake, where a small clearing could barely fit 3 tents. The air was heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. We lit a fire, roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, passed around a bottle of cheap whiskey, and laughed under a sky full of stars. The quiet out there was a kind you don't realize you miss until you feel it. It was almost too peaceful. But by the second night, that peace began to feel unnatural. It was around 11 p.m., and we were still huddled around the fire when Marcus suddenly stopped mid-laugh. His face went still, and he pointed toward the tree line. "Did you guys see that?" he asked, his voice tight. We all turned. Nothing. Just blackness between trees. Marcus insisted he'd seen movement, a shape, maybe a person, ducking behind a tree about 30 or 40 yards out. Tim brushed it off. "Probably a deer," he said. That was reasonable enough, so we shrugged it off too. But about 20 minutes later, we heard a snap. A loud one, like someone stepped on a branch. It came from the same direction. Abby looked uneasy and suggested we call it a night. We put out the fire, zipped up the tents, and tried to sleep. I shared a tent with Marcus, and despite the warm night, I found myself pulling the sleeping bag tightly over me. My skin crawled. Sometime later, I don't know how long, I woke up to a sound that makes my chest tighten even now. Breathing, not soft wind or rustling leaves. It was close. 10 feet from our tent, maybe less. Shallow, raspy breathing, like an older man who smoked too much. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe Tim or someone stepped out to pee. But I didn't hear footsteps. No stream. Just breathing. Moving from one side of the tent to the other. Then it stopped. Just silence. I lay there frozen, gripping my flashlight but not daring to turn it on. Eventually, the quiet convinced me it must have been one of my friends. I drifted back to sleep. Lightly, restlessly. The next morning, I didn't say a word. Neither did Abby. But when we all gathered for breakfast, Marcus looked wired. "Someone was outside the tents last night," he said quietly. Hannah nodded. "I heard them too. They walked around more than once. Might have been more than one person." I finally asked, "Did anyone get up to pee?" Tim raised his hand. "Yeah, around 4. But I swear, I saw someone crouched near the fire pit, just sitting there." That sent a cold shiver down my spine. We all fanned out to check the area. That's when we saw them. Footprints circling all 3 tents. In one patch where the dirt was still damp, one of the prints was clearly from a bare foot. No shoe tread, no boot print. Just human toes and heel. We tried to laugh it off. "Crazy hiker, right?" someone said. But nobody laughed very hard. That night, we built a bigger fire and sat much closer together. Everyone had their flashlights. Our conversation was quieter, more nervous. The woods no longer felt empty. They felt like they were watching. Around 2 a.m., the stillness shattered. Crunch, leaves, close. Then a voice. Low, muttering something we couldn't understand. Marcus clicked on his flashlight, scanning the trees, and that's when we saw him. A man. Naked. Pale skin, crouched behind a tree, eyes reflecting the light like an animal's. He scrambled away the second the beam hit him, disappearing into the dark. We didn't move. No one even screamed. We just sat there, clutching our lights like lifelines. Hannah whispered we should leave. Marcus and I both said no. Wandering out into that forest at night? Not a chance. What if he followed? That night was the worst of my life. I didn't sleep a second. I lay in my tent, eyes wide, every muscle tense. Hours passed, then, snap, leaves, a twig. "Please be a deer," I whispered. Then a voice answered from the woods. "I see you guys." It wasn't any of us. I waited for someone else to say something. No one did. I don't think anyone else wanted to be the first to respond. And then, the zipper. It started to slowly move down. I bolted upright and screamed at the top of my lungs. My friends all shouted in their tents too, chaos. Whoever was at my tent ran. I didn't see them, but I felt them leave. That space, that pressure, it just vanished. I zipped the tent shut again and didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling as the dark faded and the sky began to glow. At dawn, we packed up. No discussion, no breakfast, just silence and adrenaline. The hike back to the car was long and tense. Every snapped twig made us flinch. We reported everything at the ranger station. The ranger nodded like he'd heard it before. "We've had some reports," he said. "A man, maybe more than one, living rough out there. Some say they just steal stuff. Others say, worse." He didn't elaborate. We didn't ask. We tried to joke about it on the ride home. None of it was funny. I haven't gone camping since. I don't think I ever will, especially after that zipper.